Whom to call when the police is killing.
Ukrainian governments are changing one after another, but there is one person in the position who remains unchanged.
If a woman is a president, how is her husband called? The first gentleman?
Yeah.
Hello world, it's Kyiv, not Kiev, on the line, your source for the political, economic and cultural updates and insights from Ukraine.
We are very happy to join us today because we haven't seen you in a while, and we are very happy to meet each other, to meet our team in our cozy studio. Again, we're finally not in a Zoom, finally back to Kyiv, still preserving all the safety measures, but already allowed to meet in groups of more than 2 people.
My name is Polina Bachuk, this is my fellow Tatiana Haiduk, and this is Kyiv, not Kiev Season 2. And we are ready to start.
For the time we have not seen each other, Ukraine was shaken by a wave of outrage. Outrage caused by the reports that a policeman from Kyiv region raped a young woman who was summoned to the police station as a witness. This case revealed a very painful topic for Ukrainians: police reform that started 6 years ago and failed. Ukrainians do not feel safe in their own country, and it's high time admitting the fact and taking action to revert the situation.
Whom to call when the police is killing. That loud inscription appeared on a huge graffiti in the downtown of the capital. The recent incident of police violence and abuse of power also evoked last year's tragedy when drunk police officers shot dead a 5-year-old boy who was playing on a playground. The perpetrators of that horrible tragedy have not been punished yet.
Same loud and painful, but still unsolved, remains the murder of journalist Pavlo Sheremeta. Interestingly, that musician Andrei Antonenko, reef master Dr. Yulia Kuzmenko, and military nurse Yana Dugar were detained on charges of the murder. However, the investigation has not provided any evidence of their guilt yet.
Unfortunately, these are not the first instances of police brutality cases in the history of modern Ukraine. Back in 2013, police officers who were called militionere at those times were involved in the rape and attempted murder of a woman from the village of Vradiivka. The residents of that village literally stormed the police station, smashing the windows and demanding justice. Therefore, they walked to the capital on their foot, and that action became nationwide and turned into a protest against police abuse of power. Vradiivka and that acute sense of justice instilled in Ukrainians, in fact, became one of the many reasons for the Revolution of Dignity in 2014.
If Yanukovych and his ministers left, who is to be blamed for all the recent tragedies? Ukrainian governments are changing one after another, but there is one person in the position who remains unchanged: Minister of Internal Affairs, Mr. Arsen Avakov.
The very powerful minister, that is like President Zelenskyy is describing Avakov, also adding that there is no better replacement for him. However, Ukrainians think the otherwise.
On June 2nd, the Holos Party in the Ukrainian parliament initiated the signature gathering for the dismissal of Arsen Avakov because of 2 major reasons: recent incidents of extreme police brutality and the organized crime wave in Ukraine.
On June 5, the capital was massively protesting in front of the Verkhovna Rada building, demanding his dismissal. At that very time, the controversial minister was just standing before the MPs to respond regarding the incident. In his address to the parliament, interestingly, he declined all the accusations against him and the national police.
Every nigga is selling narcotics. You ever see me in the
Taking up the generic issue and following the situation in the United States and in Ukraine, it is sad to state that the international trend on such police brutality and abuse of power is gaining traction.
Indeed, it is for sure an evidence that police violence can take place anywhere in the world, despite the country's development level or extent of democracy or whatever.
I remember people were shooting "Police is with the people" in the Independence Square during the Revolution of Dignity. Indeed, The law enforcement function is almost the only function that justifies the meaning of the existence of the state as an institution for a modern person, because people have really learned to cope with everything else without the state. But the question remains, whom to call when the police is killing?
Following long-term and rather difficult discussions, on June 9, the Executive Board of the International Monetary Fund, IMF, approved an 18-month standby arrangement for Ukraine with excess equivalent to $5 billion. And the new program aims to address large balance of payments and fiscal financing needs, preserve the achievements to date, and advance a small set of key structural reforms to ensure that Ukraine is well poised to return to growth when the crisis ends.
That decision enables the immediate disbursement of about $2.1 billion. It is good or bad? Is it external governance or an incentive for reforming backed by monetary motivation? These questions and practically everything about the IMF is to be revealed in our next episode with our guest, who is a banker, brilliant expert in the finance sphere, blogger, opinion leader, and a very good friend of us. So guess who I'm talking about? And stay tuned for more.
You remember us telling you about the issues around the Donbas representatives in the peaceful talks, in the meetings of the Trilateral Contact Group in Minsk.
The so-called Donbas representatives in the peace talks appeared to be not the Donbas representatives, but Russian nationals.
As we anticipated,
What is more, Ukraine suggested introducing the IDPs, means internally displaced persons living within the reach of the governmental control, in the capacity of an invited party for them to represent the Donbas interests.
the delegation was joined by the Genuine Donbas representatives, by internally displaced persons who live within the reach of the governmental control, and they are journalists Denis Kazansky and Sergei Harmush.
Some people argue that the step of inviting the IDPs to the Trilateral Contact Group is not that good, for it seems as another justification of the internal character of the conflict, another ace in the hole of the Kremlin. Let us remind you that the conflict, or crisis, as it's sometimes called, is actually the war with Russia.
However, we insist that in our today's circumstances, in which the Trilateral Group is called trilateral because the parties to the talks are Ukraine, Russia, and the OSCE, and the so-called LNR and DNR are not considered as the parties to the conflict, but they were usually invited by the Russian party from the proxy states and even put their signatures of some of the documents. So if by inviting the real IDPs to the process, the genuine representatives of the Donbas region constituting the integral part of Ukraine, the country will score, I think that it's better than nothing.
A bit earlier this week, President Zelenskyy stated that together with his wife Elena and her assistants, he is planning to draft a bill that would regulate the status of the First Lady, meaning the bill is to strictly regulate the obligations of the president's wife. Citing Zelenskyy, when people are choosing the president, they will know for sure what the First Lady will be doing.
Right. Actually, the idea was perceived as rather ambiguous in the society. Its critics emphasized that being a president's wife does not mean actually being in an official position. Moreover, people do not vote for the first lady, they choose a president, and as this is a woman whose husband was elected president, her duties should not differ from the duties of the second, of the third, and of even the last lady in the country.
On the other hand, we understand that the lifestyle of the presidential wife, according to a number of protocol rules and regulations, involves a number of certain activities. To dive into the topic and truly understand the picture around the First Lady institution, we invited Mr. Roman Petyur, candidate of political science, associate professor at the Institute of International Relations, and an expert in diplomatic protocol and etiquette. Roman Petyur, welcome. Thank you very much for coming, for joining us today.
Thank you for your kind words. Thank you for the invitation.
As for the start, we would like to ask about the approximate obligations of the First Lady, and we would like to ask you if the status of the First Lady, is this the status of the past, or if this is the status of the modern life?
Yes, it is a rather interesting question. And you are correct in this question, because we are electing president. Irrespective of whether it is a man or a woman, we are electing a leader of the nation. Well, naturally, it doesn't matter whether it is a man or a woman, but trying to institutionalize the status of the First Lady is an attempt, you are correct, is an attempt to preserve a traditional look at the institute of president, that it should be a man. So to my mind, it is not a very good idea to promote this kind of legislation. And the practice of the leading republics in the world show us that we shouldn't even attempt to do this.
If a woman is a president, how is her husband called? The first gentleman?
Yeah, actually it's a really interesting question, because saying a first lady, we're assuming that the president of the state is a man who is in a heterosexual relationship with a woman. So it's she is a first lady. But what if the president is a lady herself? So it's the first gentleman?
Yes, it is logical to say that we should talk about first gentleman. Angela Merkel, she's not a head of state in Germany, she's a prime minister, but still she's a leader of the executive power, and her husband also enjoys a kind of a first gentleman status.
Let's talk about the real obligations of the first lady. What should a first lady do? What is her obligations due to her status of a spouse of a president? Are there any, or they are all voluntarily?
Well, I would ask whether she should do anything at all.
And what about world protocol practices, like accompanying a husband president to some international and foreign visits, presidential level? So is this an obligation, or
no, absolutely.
Just a free will?
No. A president could be not married. Mm-hmm. He could be a widower. In monarchies, kings or sheikhs could have either no wife or numerous wives.
Plenty of them.
First lady,
Yes.
second lady.
And
The
there
last
is
lady.
there is no real obligation for a president's wife to accompany him in foreign visits. Absolutely, it is always agreed. Mm-hmm. In advance. Mm-hmm. One of the first meanings of the first lady status in the United States was not the president's wife, but the hostess of the White House. In Ukraine, we don't have such a perception of the first lady. We cannot say that Olena Zelenskyi is a hostess of Mariinsky Palace. We cannot say that it goes out of the context, absolutely. So I think that we should start from this. We should understand which person is the hostess or host. Yes, if the president is a woman.
We were talking about the first lady, kind of informal institute. The same way we can talk about the informal institute ambassador's wife. So we know that these women married with ambassadors are kind of serving their country too, as their husband do, because being on a diplomatic service means to serve 24/7. Does the country of Ukraine expect from ambassadors' wives to serve, or it's also their own will?
I would correct you in one little point. As a rule, women get married not with ambassadors, but with junior diplomats. It takes time, it takes efforts, lots of efforts, to grow up to the level of ambassador. And the same applies to the spouse of this diplomat. So when a male diplomat develops his diplomatic career, his wife also develops her own diplomatic skills and understanding which role she's going to play.
Is it worth becoming a diplomat in Ukraine for a woman? My
For a
last
woman?
question. Just for me.
Well, it seems it needs to feel like a woman to answer this question, but as far as I know about the modern Ukrainian foreign service, it is open for all, and absolutely no limitations for young women, but I think it needs time to remove all of them.
And you know, I've started thinking about the career of ambassador's wife.
Do we look like diplomats with Tatiana?
Well, absolutely.
It's a tricky question. It's a tricky question. How can you do this to our guests?
Under all the protocol rules, I know that I may have not followed all of them, but anyway, thank you for your coming. That was a great pleasure.
Yeah, the pleasure was mine too. Thank you very much for explaining us the role of the First Lady, and it's not just limiting by being married to a president. So it's about own choices of every woman do, including the president's wife. So
These were, as we always finish, these were Polina Bachuk, Tatiana Hajduk, and our very special guest, Mr. Roman Petyut. Stay safe, stay kind, and remember the most important thing. Kyiv, not Kiev. We forgot to ask a bonus question. How to write the capital of Kyiv correctly?
Are there any speculations about this?
we're trying to
point.
ruin all of that.
I think everybody knows.
Yeah, good point.
So it's Kyiv, not Kiev.
See you next week. Stay tuned.
From Ukraine with love.
So,
So that is it.
дякуємо вам
То
дуже.
ви все-таки наважились на інтерв'ю англійською мовою, так?
Наважилися на інтерв'ю англійською. Це справді вартує інших зусиль,
Так.
ніж українською.
Ні, я, чесно кажучи, я знав, що ваш проєкт англомовний, я думав, ну ви, мабуть, будете українською, а потім якісь там
Субтитри
титри пускати.
То я, мабуть, варто було вас попередити про те, що ми будемо англійською спілкуватися.
Ну, я не
натякнула.
знаю, можливо, деякі речі варто було повторити, тому що десь там язик заплітався, згадував, як же ж якось з цими relevant institutions, так і